All right. This is the National Cybersecurity Alliance, and we're hosting a webinar right now called Create Strong Passwords and Actually Remember Them. This is our first of four of our core four webinars that are really focused on cybersecurity behaviors that we find extremely important. Passwords are kind of like the beginning and the end of cybersecurity for many of us. Weak passwords are one of the easiest ways for hackers to get into your accounts. Um, we're going to go over today creating strong, unique passwords and how to manage them with tools that make life easier, not harder. No more password 123, no more admin. We'll help you out. Don't worry, there's a lot of free and secure tools you can use. Hey, everybody. My name is Barry Eitel. I'm the editorial director at the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Across from me, virtually and also across the country from me, I'm in New York. He's in Washington State. Is Cliff Steinhauer. He is the director of information security and engagement. And we love talking about passwords.
We do. Good to see you, Barry.
Um, let's okay. So like I said, this is the first of our core four webinars. Core four behaviors, really important to us. One is passwords, another one is using multi-factor authentication, another one is keeping your software updated. And the fourth one is knowing how to identify phishing and scams. Passwords, though, super important. And there's actually been some new guidance with not new anymore, but in the past couple of years, the guidance has kind of changed on passwords. So this is like a really great topic to talk to. Okay, Cliff. Oh, I kind of did this already. Can you give a brief over? Okay, how about we get Cliff's view here? What to you? What is the core four, and why is it important for everyone to know?
Well, again, yeah, the core four, the passwords, the MFA, the software updates, and avoiding phishing and scams. These are kind of like the four main things that anyone can do to really raise the bar on their personal cybersecurity, right? Like, if you could get these things right, the attackers are going to move from you to the next person who haven't gotten these things right, right? So these are the low-hanging fruit for bad guys that most people will be compromised by if they are going to fall victim to a cyber attack. So that's why we focus on these. These are the ones that anybody involved with using the internet is going to encounter in their lives on a daily basis. And they're the ones that are the most likely to be successful for bad guys, and they're the ones that we have the most control over, right? So we don't have control over software vulnerabilities. We don't have control over nation state threat actors going after, big businesses that have our data. But we do have control over how strong our passwords are, whether we use multi-factor authentication, whether or not we keep our software updated, and our ability to identify and avoid phishing and scams. So that's why at the National Cybersecurity Alliance, we're really focused on those because they're the most actionable things that we can do that are actually going to make a difference for most people. So every cybersecurity awareness month since I've been here, we've been talking about these core four. We're bringing them back again for
Oh yeah.
2025.
Now it's not even October, and we're talking about them because we're so excited.
Exactly. And honestly, like they sound pretty basic, right? If you're in security or if you're in tech, these are some things that you should be doing and it's kind of a given if you're in the space. But for consumers, we need a reminder, we need a nudge, we need to be
Mhm.
educated about the importance of doing these things and how to do them and do them well, do them correctly. Because it's still such a problem. So many people are compromised by one of these items, even though we've been talking about it for 20 years,
Yep.
that it's worth mentioning and bringing to people in a new way so that we can explain it in a way people can take action.
Yeah, and I think one thing we often talk about is you can't make yourself cyber proof, hack proof,
Right.
but by following these behaviors, you can really reduce your the likelihood if you follow these four. And like you said, these are like the lowest hanging fruit. And I would say like the strong like having a weak password is like the lowest hanging fruit for a bad guy. Um, so yeah, we often say passwords are the first line of defense between a criminal and your sensitive information. How many passwords do we have? We probably have hundreds through all these accounts we've collected through decades. Okay, so we focus on we say a strong password has three qualities. It has to be long, it has to be complex, and it has to be unique. Cliff, can you explain these three guidelines in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, 100%. So you simply can't use a four character password anymore.
Yep.
It is too easy to guess, right? Like it's kind of amazing to me that we still use four-digit pins for our debit cards, but you
Yeah.
do have to have the physical card at least. But online, it's really easy for bad guys to use a computer program to guess your password. And the longer it is, the more difficult it is for the bad guy to guess that password. So length is a really important aspect of your password. 8, 10 years ago, the advice was 8 characters.
Wow.
4 years ago, it was 12 characters. Today, it's 16
Yep.
characters. The reason for that is that the computer processors available to your everyday hacker have gotten so much faster, more cores, more gigahertz. The CPU of the computer can process a lot of data a lot faster. And that's what it needs to do in order to crack a password. So the more powerful your computer is, the faster you can go through all the iterations of every character of a certain password. So that's why 16 characters is now the new minimum, is because computers have just
16 characters. Yeah.
16 characters, which I know I tell people that and they're like,
Third.
that's long. Like that's that's a lot of characters,
Yeah.
right? And then you got to throw in the complexity requirements, right? So you
Mhm.
can't just have all numbers. You can't just have all lowercase letters. You have to have an uppercase letter, a lowercase letter, a number, and a special character. So those four pieces also have to be part of that. And then in terms of being unique, you can't just make one password that you then use everywhere. This was kind of like what everybody did 30
Yep.
years ago, 20 years ago. When you first got online, you're like, oh God, I need to make a password. Okay, this is one I can remember. So da 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 da, and that's going to be my password for everything. Well, now the problem with that is if your attacker gets into any one of those accounts, they can then use that password on a whole bunch of other
Yep.
accounts. And there's software that will do this for them. It will actually go out on the internet and take your username, your login, plus your password, and just spray it all over and see where it works. And then they get a nice little spreadsheet back and says, okay, this username and password can be logged into this 100 accounts. So if you use a unique password, then you're completely eliminating that possibility.
How about let's say I have a really good password. It's my hometown plus a number. And then for another account, I add an at sign. And then for a third account, I add two more numbers. I mean, what would you say about that strategy?
I mean, the attackers, if they're motivated, they can easily take iterations of this one password and kind of change some of the bits and pieces of it at the end. So, like, let's say you use a month and year, August 2025,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden they're looking at every month in 2025 to see if you've used the first part of the password, but then you just change a little bit of the password. So there's really easy ways for attackers to do that and to make iterations of the same password. And it's more important that we keep them individualized for every account. And they can easily guess if you're doing some kind of a pattern, right?
Mhm.
Like so they get your password for Target.com and it's whatever my password is, and then it says Target, or whatever my password is, and then Amazon, so they know when they're going to these other sites that you're going to be using that bit at the end, and they just update it for that part. So um, definitely needs to be random. So like another term we like to use here is it needs to be random. It can't just be something that can easily be tied to you if somebody were to Google you or look you up on social media, right? Like it's not hard to find your hometown where you're from. It's not hard to find your pet's name if you're posting about it on Instagram, or if your kids or your wife or your whoever is directly related to you. And birthdays and anniversaries are super, super easy to figure out. And attackers know we use that because it's easy for us to remember. I'm not going to forget my anniversary most of the time. So that makes a good
Putting a lot of
password,
pressure on yourself, Cliff.
right? Um, so you definitely want to make it random and unique as well. And of course, meeting the complexity and length requirements. So it's a little bit of a task to come up with
Yeah.
a long enough, complex enough, and unique password for all of these hundreds of accounts, right?
Yeah. A task for a human. But before we go, okay, so we kind of are talking about what makes, I guess, uh, what separates a weak password from a strong password. Let's get a little controversial here. Okay, what is stronger, a longer password or a more complex password?
It's a longer password every
Oh,
time.
wow.
Even
You
if your
said it,
password
folks.
is all sorts of different random characters that make no sense to a human and you would never be able to memorize. If it's only 8 characters, it's not going to be enough because, as I mentioned before, the computing power needed to crack an 8 character password can do it in, 2 minutes.
Mhm.
But the longer that password is, the exponentially longer it takes. It makes it time and cost prohibitive for an attacker to go
Yeah.
through the iterations of a 16 character password.
Like billions of years, right?
Right. I know. It's like it would never, they would
The
just wouldn't do
sun
it.
would explode by the time they get your
Yeah.
Facebook.
That password
Um,
is not getting cracked.
Uh, and okay, so there's been some guidance in the past. I think oftentimes we've also been forced to do this through various like school or work accounts. But how often should we change a password?
Excellent question. So the advice used to be changing it periodically so that if it were compromised, it couldn't be used because you have a new one. The problem with that is at the time that advice was current is that people were just kind of changing one little tiny piece of it and then moving on. So like, I don't know, password 123, password 324, password 526. So, just kind of like going through changing a tiny, tiny bit about it. And what that did was it created a weaker password overall, right? So like if you create a nice, long, strong password that's unique and meets all the complexity requirements, you don't need to change it that often unless you find out that the password or the account has been compromised or if you realize that you're reusing it or some problem with it. But generally, if it's long and complex and unique, you can keep it as long as you want, as long as there's no reason to believe the password itself has been leaked. So if the website that you have the password on has some kind of data breach, you absolutely want to change it as soon as possible, and really monitor that account. But otherwise, there's really no need to change them in any kind of frequency. I'll say the exception might be some of your most sensitive accounts, like maybe your password manager itself. Um, maybe annually or
Mm.
every year or two. But for most standard accounts, they don't force you to change it anymore.
What what are some examples of when you should change your password? Even like we said, data breaches, but like well, maybe just answer that. What are some examples of when you should actually change your password?
If there's a data breach, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, it depends on the data breach too, right? So if it's like some massive data breach of let's say credit information or credit monitoring
Mhm.
service or a credit provider, you might want to start changing passwords to anything that has to do with finance. So
Mhm.
your banks, your Venmos, your PayPals, and things like that. Um, anything that's tied to another account also. So like sometimes people use like Facebook to log in with
Mhm.
something, or they might use Google to log in with something, for example. If that something becomes compromised, and it's signing in with Google, then technically it could go back to Google and maybe use your Google account to sign into things. So um, I would say anything that can be used to sign into something else,
Mhm.
probably change that one if you hear about any kind of data breach that your information could be related in. And there's a good website. It's called haveibeenpwned.com
Oh,
that you can
yes.
go in and put in your email address and see where that email address has appeared in a data breach. And if it's there, then you can usually see which account was breached, and then you would know, okay, I need to change this password.
So, say you get a letter in the mail. I think probably a lot of us have received these over the years that says that your information was lost in a breach, or you hear about some news like you're watching the night settle down watching the nightly news and you hear about a data breach. You see it online that a data breach occurred. Uh, are there times when you should change your password, even if they don't specifically tell you to change your password?
Yes. So you have to kind of watch the news, and you can use that Have I Been Pwned site.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, you just have to kind of pay attention to any notifications or anything fishy too. Like if you get a phishing email for a site and you realize that you've maybe logged into that site, you definitely want to go back and change that password as soon as possible. Um, so it's just super important to kind of stay vigilant and to pay attention to any kind of alerts about your accounts. And again, anything that's really sensitive, like your email accounts, which are really important because that's how you can reset your passwords, um, need to be kept current and probably updated every year or so.
Okay, so just to review, we want all of your passwords to be 16 characters long, a random mix of letters, numbers, and special characters, and we want them to each one to be unique to the account. That seems like a really tall order for a human being to process. Um, what are the solutions to keeping ourselves secure in this environment where we have lots of passwords?
Yeah, so there are a handful of ways you could do it. One of the ways a lot of people do it is they write it down in a
Mhm.
notebook or something that they keep, hopefully keep it protected and secure, and are able to kind of see that they're making unique passwords. Um, there's We used to really suggest not to do that, but we've kind of lightened up a little bit because we realize that that might be the best solution for most people, or for some people, I should say. So if you want to do it that way, go for it. It's a lot of manual work, but so is using a password manager, which I'll
I
get
think as
into.
long as you remember those three rules.
Exactly. So you want to make sure that, well, first of all, you want to keep that thing protected. You don't want to leave that on your dashboard in your car, or your front seat of the car, right? Like treat it like a box of cash. You want to make sure that if you're going to use a notebook, that you physically secure that notebook all the time. Um, and then again, you can make sure that you're using, you can write down the requirements at the front of the notebook, like
Mhm.
16 characters, random, and making sure that you're doing all the like special character, capital, lowercase, and things like that. A great way to create passwords is to use what we call passphrase.
Mhm.
So that's where you take probably at least 3 to 5 random words, put a hyphen in between them, so a dash, and then do some capital, and then do like a number somewhere. So that will actually meet the complexity requirements, and you're likely to get to a longer password. So you got to make sure though that you're using extremely random words. Like
Yeah.
don't use your favorite word, or anything like that. Like that's obvious. So as long as you can kind of think of some random words to throw in there, and not reusing them, and don't put the same words in different orders for different sites, like completely random words, you can create a passphrase. So those are a lot easier to type in, than just like a whole bunch of jumbled letters. But then it needs to be, I would say, more than 16 characters, because there are tools out there that can guess passwords that use full words, that are built to do that. So you want to make sure you're using either underscores or hyphens. You could separate it with a special character or something like that. But that's one way to kind of manually, with your brain, create some decently long and unique and strong enough passwords. But then finally, the gold, the holy grail, the best case scenario, the one that every security professional and IT professional who have a good sense of security will use is a password manager. So a password manager is a software tool that can store all of your passwords with strong encryption. It can generate passwords that are long and unique and complex, and it can then fill them in for you without you having to type anything. So you install it into your browser, you can install it onto an app on your phone, and you can also access it from just a browser window. But the browser extension, if you're a computer user, if you're using a PC, is the easiest and fastest way to implement the password manager because it sits there in your browser. Let's say you go to google.com, you log in with your existing username and password, wherever you're pulling that password from, and then it will pop up and say, "Oh, would you like me to store this password for you for later use?" You're like, "Sure, I'll do that." And you do that to every site. And over time, you'll build up this vault of passwords. And then when you go back to log in next time, it will fill it in for you without you having to type in anything, and you protect the password manager with your own single long enough that and unique password that you haven't used anywhere else. This is the one password that you have to remember. Everything else that goes into the password manager, you never have to remember it again. And so when you go in and start using the password manager, you can actually use the password manager to change your password to a super random, super unique complex password that is a whole mess of jumbled upper lowercase special character numbers. Um, that's 16, or I turn mine up way higher. I mean, I go like 24, 32. As much as the site will allow me, I put it in as long as possible because that future proofs my password. So when the guidance changes in 3 years from 16 characters to 20
24.
characters, 24 characters, I'm already there. So that's helpful to do. If you start to use a password manager, you can go through and start to make those really long and really unique and totally random. And then they just basically copy and paste right in. Sometimes you might have to hit the copy and paste feature, but a lot of times it'll just pop in your password into the field and you just hit submit and you're off and running.
And a
So
lot of the high quality password managers, they have mobile apps as well, correct?
exactly. So they've got what they call the web vault. So whatever the password manager is, .com, you log in and you can see all your passwords there and copy and paste and manage them there. You've got the little web extension that you can install into your browser, which I find super helpful. And then yes, you have a mobile app. And what that will do is it actually integrates with your mobile device to then fill in passwords for you, just like the built-in keychain on your mobile device would do. So that's a really great option as well. And
What about the password manager that's included on your browser, like Chrome's, or password managers that are included on your device, like Apple Password?
sure, so there are differences between those built-in password managers and the third-party apps that I'm talking about as a standalone password manager. They have pros and cons. The main one though, like that a lot of people use, is the built-in password manager in like Chrome. Um, and I think it has gotten better in recent years. The previous advice was it isn't stored with the same protection level as a third-party password manager. And I don't have a lot of data to know if it has gotten a lot better. I do know that 2 years ago, it was able to use a tool that would scrape those passwords right out of your password manager in what we call a drive-by attack. So basically, you just go to a site, it will pull the password hashes out of your browser, and they can go take them and crack them from there, which isn't very hard. But a password manager actually uses zero knowledge encryption architecture, which sounds like a really complex thing, and it is. But essentially, nobody can read those passwords without your master password. So even if they were to somehow pull that data, which is not possible right now, um, you would be protected by encryption. Finally, the Apple passwords, the one that actually comes with the phone, it is a good tool because Apple in particular uses what we call a trusted platform module. It's a small, tiny physical device in your phone. It's like a little microprocessor where secrets are stored. Same place where your Face ID is stored and things like that. So the keys to get to your passwords stored in the Apple Password Manager are well protected, and I do think it's a good solution. Now, the problem with that is that those passwords are hard to get on non-Apple devices.
Mhm.
Not impossible. There is a way to install iCloud on your Windows PC
Virtually.
and then also install the Keychain app on your browser, just like I was talking about as a browser extension. In my experience, it's glitchy. It doesn't work great.
Mm.
Um, However, the Apple Password Manager has a couple of features that are really nice. One is obviously it can store and create long and unique passwords for you, but it also tells you if they're compromised and if they're weak and if they're reused. And a lot of good password managers will also do
Yep.
that. They'll tell you these passwords have been in data breach, change it right now. These passwords are reused, change them. These passwords are weak, change them. So look for those features in your password manager.
Okay, we have a handful of minutes left. I want to get to some of these questions. I have three things, though. Please join us for our next Core 4 webinar. It's on the 20th of August. That's all about multi-factor authentication. We're big fans of that too. Second, Lucas, in the chat, could you please put in a link to our article on password managers? We don't give recommendations on specific products, but we'll give you a guide to some of the stuff that's out there. Um, so Lucas, if you could do that for me. And then third, Cliff, I know you're a big fan of passkeys, so maybe could you give like a minute explaining what a passkey is and why people should start using passkeys?
Sure. Yeah, and if you're okay, I'm okay going over to answer some of these other questions too.
Sure.
I didn't realize we had like 34 questions, but so a pass key is essentially a super long, unique, complex well, it's not really a password, but it's basically the same idea as a password, but it's generated by your device and the service. And it's basically stored in what I mentioned earlier, that trusted hardware piece of your machine that can only be unlocked through your biometric data, your device access keys. So they don't transmit any passwords in clear text. Um, it's a much safer and easier thing than using a password because it's automatically complex, it's automatically unique, it's tied to the hardware that you're using, and it can be unlocked with biometric data. So um, if you see the opportunity to add a passkey, I know like Walmart has them, Google has them now. Lots of services are starting to offer the use of a passkey. And you basically would align that device to that account. And then when you go back to log in, it would just say, here's your Face ID, here's your Touch ID, whatever it is, and you log in that way. Um, I think that's the easiest way to explain it because it's actually very technical how it works,
Yeah,
but they are
they're
super
very
secure.
secure.
And they're super convenient. So yeah, they're basically a one-step multi-factor authentication because it's something you have, your device, and then something you are, like your face or your device pin. So they're pretty cool. All right. I'm going to pick the first question to answer, and it's just kind of random here. So somebody said, can you add a physical device like a YubiKey with a password manager? Yes, you can. So a password manager will usually integrate with a physical hardware key, like a YubiKey, in order for you to authenticate to your vault. Usually, it's like a second method. Like you could also use your master password to get in, and then you can add the YubiKey as your second factor in the multi-factor authentication process. And I did not mention multi-factor authentication. That's going to be our next webinar, I
And our
believe.
next one. You have to tune in
But
next
all of
week.
this stuff about passwords um, is a lot stronger when you add multi-factor authentication to it. So adding that second step of, a Face ID, a texted passcode, a emailed anything like that, that adds another layer onto your
You're basically
password.
like doubling your protection with
It's
that.
very, very important. So even if you're compromised with a password, they still can't get in because of the MFA. Can I mention the Hive Systems group password table? That's a fantastic resource. So if you are interested, you can look at the Hive Systems password table, and it will give you a visual how long it takes to crack various lengths and complexities of passwords. And that's kind of where we get that quote of, an 8 character password takes a few seconds and then a 16 character password takes like a trillion years. They have a research study that they do every year. They get big blocks of GPUs and NVIDIA cores, and they go after all these passwords and see how long it takes. So it's a really cool tool. You see any interesting questions, Barry, you think I should answer?
Maybe one last one, which was it was like how do you recommend like getting oh, this is a good one. What would you recommend for guidelines for seasoned people who may not be tech savvy as far as password management? I feel like we kind of talked about the notebook if you really want to go that route, but we really prefer, I think, password managers is what we're saying.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna lie to you. You implementing a password manager can be daunting. It can be
Yeah,
tedious. It can be time consuming. But once you get it working and once you've implemented it, it's super, super convenient and super
yeah.
easy. So it just takes a little bit of a learning curve, and then you'll get over that hump and you'll be
Then
using it.
start storing it as you're using it,
Exactly, you'll love it.
storing all
And
your
there's
passwords.
also ways to import. If you are currently using your browser for storing your passwords, you can export them and then import them into your password manager, and that'll get you a lot farther, a lot quicker. Um, the password notebook, again, if you're talking to, people my parents' age, they're like, I don't trust this password manager thing. I'm not wanting to learn a new tool. A password notebook then might be your best answer. Don't use the notes feature in your phone.
Mm.
Don't use an Excel spreadsheet on your computer or a Word document on your computer. Those are not secure. Those are not going to work. The physicality of having a notebook means that people around the world on the internet can't get to it, right? Like you just have to physically protect it from somebody, stealing it from you who knows you. And then if you lose the notebook, you're in for
Yeah,
a lot of work
yeah.
because
A lot of pain.
resetting, usually you can reset all those passwords, but it's going to take a long time, right? So, um, password manager is definitely the easiest one. And there's lots of videos out there, including some that I'm producing or have produced about how to use one. But just check out YouTube and they can definitely steer you in the right direction as well. I did see a couple comments about using passphrases. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but passphrases can be a really useful way to create. And if you have to remember them, you can actually reasonably remember them.
Yeah.
So I do think passphrases are kind of making a comeback. Like they kind of were around for a while and then went away. And I think they're actually a pretty good tool, to remember your passwords.
Just remember 16 characters long, unique to the account, and ideally, I think we still support some complexity in there. Uh,
Yeah, most websites will require you to have the complexity of upper or lower number special character. Very, very few sites will just allow you to put in, letters only, for example. So although it doesn't need to be overly complex, you don't need 10 special characters, you just need, one.
yeah.
So like just look at what the password box is telling you it requires, and then you'll be able to figure that out. Okay, so last one I'm going to answer, and then if you guys have follow-up questions, you can send us messages.
Yes.
I'll let Lucas drop that in a way to do that. But if your password manager gets hacked, so from what I can recall, that's only happened one time to one specific password manager organization. And even though that happened, there weren't very many issues. And the reason for that is encryption. So even the password manager itself cannot tell anyone what your passwords are without your master password plus the multi-factor authentication to then authenticate to your account. So if a password manager server, let's say, that's storing all these passwords was to get breached and the attacker got a copy of the server, all the data on the server, it's all encrypted, to a very, very high degree. And they would not be able to access any of your passwords. They wouldn't be able to use anything because it's all jumbled. So what would happen is, they'd just be left with a bunch of useless data. The only way for them to do anything with it would be to map it back to a specific individual's account, like your email, your login, and brute force or somehow find your password for your password manager, which should be very long and unique and not easy to get. They will not let you put in a short,
Mhm.
easy password for your password manager. They're going to force you to do a long, unique one. And then also you're going to have to be turning FA on that password manager. So if you're going to start using a password manager, make sure that you turn on multi-factor authentication before you start using it. So you got to get another way in other than just the
I think a
password.
lot
So,
of them probably force you to do that too now. A lot of the standalone ones.
honestly, I've done some videos lately and they don't all force
Oh wow.
multi-factor by default, but they really, really should. And I highly, highly suggest that you do that. We'll talk about MFA on our next
Yep.
one. I don't want to keep everybody too long, but I really appreciate all the questions and
This was
more than
great.
happy to answer your questions. Uh, Lucas put in info at StaySafeOnline.org. We'll definitely get to your questions and do check out our site. There's a lot of good advice there written by Barry.
StaySafeOnline.org. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yes,
Fact check
he's
by
he's
Cliff.
explained a lot of these things.
All
So,
right.
yeah. So, all right, cool. This was fun, Barry.
Yeah, no, this was a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody.
All right, have a great day.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.